The smell in the kitchen this morning made me freeze halfway down the stairs. It wasn't the scent of baked goods or fried eggs like when Mom left early for work. It was sharp, metallic, and unfamiliar, something that stung the inside of my nose. "Drink up, helps with nerves." His voice rumbled behind me, low and casual as he handed me the stainless steel travel mug. I took it instinctively, but my heart was pounding, like I'd just realized something I wasn't supposed to miss. Craig, the man my mother married nearly 10 years after being widowed, still carried himself like someone who believed he was always right. His eyes scanned me from collar to shoes, freshly polished the night before, then settled on the leather briefcase I was clutching like a lifeline. It was like he was sizing me up, deciding if I was worthy of stepping out of that house for something bigger than myself. I gave a polite smile. "I'll take it with me, drink it on the way." The mug felt heavier than usual, or maybe that was just my nerves. "Big day," Craig said, leaning against the sink with arms crossed. "Let's hope nothing gets in your way." It sounded like encouragement, but the way he emphasized every word made my skin crawl. That was Craig, kind words wrapped around something colder. A contractor who called himself a realist, always ready with a smirk about how 4 years of college just to make pretty brochures was a waste. By then, Mom had already left for her early hospital shift. She's the head nurse at a community care center on the outskirts of Boise. She usually gave me a hug and a few last-minute reminders before leaving. But not this morning. This morning, it was just me and Craig. I stepped out the front door into the sharp chill of early March. Red brick houses lined the foggy street, still quiet in the gray dawn. I walked to the familiar gas station on the corner, where the trash can sat conveniently beside the coffee machine. Without hesitation, I flipped the lid off the mug. A sharp chemical smell hit me, stronger than any coffee I'd ever tasted. The liquid inside was unusually dark, with a strange, oily film shimmering on top. I poured it straight into the trash, watching it soak into crumpled napkins and sandwich wrappers. I resealed the lid quietly. My pulse was still racing. Something was off. Not just this morning. This had been building for months. I'm Richard Hayes, 27. After graduating in communications from Oregon State, I moved back to Boise to live with Mom. The job market was tight, and my plan was to save money before heading to Seattle, where branding and creative jobs were more abundant. But 3 months stretched into nearly 2 years. I picked up freelance gigs, gradually building a decent portfolio. Enough to get noticed. And a week ago, I received an email that nearly knocked the wind out of me. North Range Equipment, the outdoor brand I'd admired since college, wanted to interview me for their spring campaign coordinator position. It hadn't come easy. I'd spent countless nights teaching myself design, creating mock-ups for North Range on my own, and uploading them to creative forums. No one sponsored me, no shortcuts, just grit. But Craig never once respected that effort. To him, success meant pouring concrete on schedule, not launching colorful digital campaigns. Anytime I landed a small contract, he'd snort and ask, "That pay enough to cover gas?" with a sneer. This morning felt different, though. There was something in the way he looked at me when handing over that coffee, as if waiting to see if I'd drink it. I couldn't be sure what was happening, but I knew one thing. I had to get out of that house. And I wouldn't let anyone keep me from the life I'd fought so hard to build. I remember clearly the first time Craig called me a coloring book kid. I was sitting in the living room, editing a design for a small campaign promoting artisanal candles, the first project that paid enough to help cover our utility bill. I was so focused I didn't notice Craig behind me. "Spent all afternoon playing with your little rainbow pictures," he scoffed. "Back in my day, if you couldn't haul bricks, you stayed home. Nobody paid us to click a mouse." I kept my voice calm. "It's real work, Craig, a legit contract." He barked a laugh. "A contract? For what? Selling candles? You think people need you to tell them how to light a wick?" The room went heavy. I stayed quiet, eyes locked on the screen, but every word he spoke cut deeper. Since I graduated, Craig had turned the pressure up. Always hovering, always finding ways to question my progress. How many interviews I'd landed, how much time I was wasting on my portfolio. Instead of doodling all night, why not learn a trade? "Welding 6 weeks and done," he once said, wiping his hands on his shirt while chewing on a cold sandwich. I didn't argue. Every time I tried, it just gave him more fuel. It was easier to endure the silence than feed the fire. Mom? She kept trying to keep the peace. Craig just wants what's best for you, she'd say. He worries you won't have job security. But she didn't know that sometimes I'd step away from my laptop and return to find my design files closed, or worse, replaced by browser tabs full of truck ads. Once, I left my phone on my desk while Mom called me from outside. When I came back, there was a failed login notification from my work email. I couldn't prove it was Craig, but no one else touched my stuff in that house. Another time, I was minutes from a video interview with a company in Portland. The Wi-Fi died just as the call started. I ran out and saw Craig in the garage, holding the modem. He just shrugged and said, "Tech's garbage." I wanted to believe it was all coincidence, but after too many incidents, coincidence became a pattern I couldn't ignore. Craig never yelled. Instead, he wore me down with side comments, small sabotages, quiet manipulations designed to chip away at my confidence. He didn't need to ban me from succeeding, he just needed to plant enough doubt to make me think I couldn't. I once caught him adjusting the living room alarm clock, thinking I wasn't watching. I found pages missing from my portfolio after a single afternoon away. Emails I swore I sent somehow still sat in my drafts folder the next day. Once, I told Mom I was thinking of moving out. I barely got the words "move out" when Craig emerged from the kitchen, beer in hand, his stare sharp as a blade. "Go ahead," he said. "Just don't come crawling back when you get tossed out on your ass." Mom looked at him, opened her mouth to say something, then just sighed and walked into her room. Like she'd done this dance too many times to care anymore. The longer I stayed in that house, the more it felt like living in a thick smoke vent. Hard to breathe, no exit in sight. Sometimes I wondered, what if I had drunk that coffee this morning? If I'd been late, drowsy, disoriented, what would Craig have said? Probably, "Told you so." Just one misstep and he'd declare me a worthless leech. But not this time. This time I'd seen through the fog. No matter how hard he tried to twist the truth, he couldn't distort reality if I stayed alert. And this morning as I adjusted my tie in the mirror, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't just walking out to an interview. I was walking out from under Craig's shadow. For good. I started writing everything down. Not on my phone, not on my computer, but by hand, in an old, black notebook hidden at the bottom of my drawer. At first, it was just a few messy lines, dates, small incidents that seemed insignificant, like the alarm clock that randomly reset itself to 2:37 a.m. the night before a video call with a company in Denver. I didn't set it that way. No one else had touched it, unless... Then there was the missing file. A campaign design I had spent the entire weekend perfecting suddenly wiped clean. No backup, not even in the trash. I used to think I was careless, but after it happened 3 times, user error didn't cut it anymore. Wi-Fi wasn't much better. Every time I had an important call scheduled, the modem would blink red right on cue, and every time I ran out into the hallway with panic in my eyes, I'd see Craig walking by, tool in hand or pretending to check pipes near the router. "This house's internet is garbage," he'd mutter, like always. I would force a chuckle, but it stopped being funny a long time ago. Things became clearer one Friday night when I was digging through Craig's truck for a pair of pliers to help Mom with a burnt-out kitchen light. I opened the back of his pickup, he never locked it, and saw a small, unlabeled plastic bottle. It was tucked behind a toolbox, cap scuffed, filled with small, white round tablets. No markings. I had taken a first aid elective in college. I'd seen pills like these before. Zolpidem, or something in the same sleep aid family. I didn't grab it immediately. I wore gloves, wrapped it in tissue, and placed it back exactly where it had been. But that night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling one question. Why was Craig carrying something that strong around in his truck? Mom didn't use medication like that. She hated the artificial grogginess, always preferred chamomile tea or light stretching before bed. Craig had never once complained about sleep issues. At least, not in front of me. And then came that morning's coffee. Having the metallic scent from the cup, the way he handed it to me, nodding, like he was offering condolences before a battle, not encouragement. After dumping the mug at the gas station, I went inside, bought a regular black coffee, then sat in my car and took a deep breath. The old smell still clung to my nose. I remembered a morning last fall when I overslept and missed the beginning of a remote interview. Called 3 times before I picked up. My alarm hadn't gone off. I blamed my phone, changed apps, but what if someone else had tampered with it? It couldn't all be coincidence. Not that many times. Not with that many missed chances. I flipped open my notebook and added a line. March 14th, morning coffee. Strange odor, oily surface. Did not drink. Discarded at Madison gas station. I wrote down every detail, nothing omitted. Each word like a nail into the framework of a much bigger picture forming in front of me. 3 days later, I was in the garage looking for a paintbrush for Mom, and I saw Craig hunched over the coffee maker. That one had never been shared. I had my own travel mug. Mom used the electric kettle, but Craig, for some reason, was measuring spoonfuls of coffee grounds and quietly dropping something into the pot from a small bag. I didn't say a word. I backed out silently and recorded everything in the notebook. Time, what Craig was wearing, where he stashed the zip bag. In the bottom drawer of his tool chest, I was too tired to keep pretending I didn't see. That night, I quietly took the unlabeled bottle from his truck. In its place, I left a replica, same size, same color, but empty. I'd ordered it online weeks ago, just in case. I didn't have a full plan, but my instincts told me I needed proof, something tangible. I was no longer convinced Craig simply disliked me because we had different values. He might be someone actively trying to ruin me, hiding behind household routines. Maybe he wasn't just trying to control Mom. Maybe I was part of that control too. The next morning, I left early for work but returned around noon to grab a jacket I'd forgotten. The kitchen was empty, but my travel mug was sitting on the table. Empty. Clean, even though I remembered, clearly, locking it in my room. Craig had tried again. I stared at the mug, a chill spreading from the base of my neck to my spine. I didn't know what the next step would be, but I knew one thing. From now on, every move Craig made would be logged. No more coincidences. No more shadows to hide in. I was going to shine a light into every dark corner of this house, no matter who it belonged to. That morning, when I walked into the kitchen, the ceiling light was already on. On the counter, my familiar silver travel mug sat waiting, faint steam rising from the barely closed lid. Craig stood with his back to me, slowly stirring a spoon in the coffee pot. He wore his usual gray work clothes, speckled with old paint stains. The moment I stepped in, he turned around like he'd been waiting. "Made you a cup," he said, no smile. "Figured you could use some caffeine before the big day." I froze. Craig had never made me coffee before. He once said I was wasting money on bitter sludge. "Thanks," I replied, keeping my voice steady. I stepped forward, took the still warm mug. I didn't need to smell it, I already knew. But I popped the lid anyway, pretending to blow on it. The metallic scent hit me like a slap. Sharp. Chemical. Off. Just like the bottle I found in his truck. A thin, oily layer floated across the surface. An unspoken warning meant only for me to recognize. Craig leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "Careful with pressure," he added, his eyes glancing at the mug. "Not everyone handles expectations well." I looked at him, then at the coffee, then back at him. Morning light streamed through the blinds outside. So calm it almost felt staged. But inside me, something had just hit its limit. I gave a faint smile and closed the lid. Yeah, big day. "I'll take it with me, drink it on the way." Craig didn't say anything else. He just nodded slowly, as if satisfied with something. I slipped the mug into my bag, walked out the door, and didn't look back. Only after I was nearly a block away did I pull over at a gas station. Without hesitation, I opened the lid and dumped the contents straight into the trash bin next to the pump. The liquid was thicker than usual, oddly dark, and again that metallic stench hit me hard enough to hold my breath. I watched it soak into napkins and sandwich wrappers, then quickly snapped the lid back on. The mug was still warm in my hand, but now it was empty. Sitting back in the car for a few minutes, I let out a slow breath. No anger, no panic, just a cold, eerie clarity. This time, it was undeniable. This wasn't a tech glitch or a coincidence. Craig had done it on purpose. He wanted me tired, distracted, maybe even drowsy mid-interview, or worse. I couldn't say exactly what his plan was, but I knew one thing for sure. I hadn't let it happen. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and recorded a short video of the empty mug, zooming in on the oily film still clinging to the bottom. I added a note with the time, date, and place. Coffee prepared by Craig. First time ever, strange odor. Dumped at Cannon Street gas station. I saved the clip and started the car. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I still had time. Before heading to the interview, I stopped by the small coffee shop across from North Range Outfitters. The smell of real coffee rising from a hot paper cup brought a strange sense of comfort. I sat in the car, coffee in hand, staring at the glass front building. Each window lit up, people walking in and out with purpose and confidence. This was where I wanted to belong. Not Craig's house, not that dim garage where he muttered about the weak generation. I didn't check my portfolio again. I didn't need to. I was ready. When I walked into the main lobby, I smiled at the receptionist. "Richard Hayes, I'm here for the 10 o'clock interview." She nodded with a warm smile. "Please have a seat to the right. Someone will be with you shortly." I sat down, real coffee in hand. The fake one was long gone in the trash. My portfolio rested on my lap. But I wasn't thinking about presentation slides anymore. Only one thought remained. If that morning's coffee was the last trap Craig had set to make me fall, he'd failed. I'd stepped past it. And this time, I wasn't going back. I walked out of North Range Outfitters later with a stunned feeling. The interview had passed in a blur. Not because I was underprepared, but because everything went so smoothly it felt unreal. I spoke clearly, shared specific examples from past freelance projects, explained branding strategies I'd developed for small businesses. When I showed my mock-up for North Range's spring campaign, I saw the marketing director's expression shift. From curious to focused, then, finally, impressed. "This is very intuitive and aligned with our brand," he said, nodding slowly. "How long did it take you to build this concept?" "I've been developing it for nearly a year," I replied, unable to hide my pride. "Since I was still in school, I thought about a campaign that connects products to real-life emotion. Not just images, but experience." At the end of the interview, I was asked to wait a few more minutes. When the HR director returned, she smiled brightly. "Richard Hayes," she said, "we'd like you to start next Monday. Starting salary is at the top of our range, and you'll be eligible for full benefits after 90 days. Welcome to North Range." I don't remember what I said, probably a lot of repeated thank yous, maybe a firmer handshake than usual. But when I walked out of that office, the early spring sun felt warmer, the sidewalk somehow brighter. I had just crossed the line between dreaming and actually living it. That afternoon, as I drove home, my head was spinning with logistics. How much I'd need for a security deposit, what I'd have to buy, whether I'd move out before the weekend or wait for my first paycheck. I'd almost forgotten about the morning's coffee, until I stepped inside the house. And instantly, my body knew something was off. The door was unlocked. The living room blinds were drawn tight. The light from the half-Mormon TV barely glowing. The air smelled wrong. Chemicals, bleach, and faintly of vomit. Craig was slumped on the couch, head tilted to the side, arms wrapped around a plastic bucket like a life raft. His face was pale, sweat soaking his forehead and collar. Bloodshot eyes looked up at me when I froze in the doorway. "You back already?" he mumbled, his voice hoarse. "What the hell was in that coffee?" I glanced at the end table. The same stainless steel mug, lid off, completely empty. My chest tightened. Craig had drunk it. "You drank my coffee?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Craig didn't answer. He hunched over, retching again. Just then, Mom rushed in from the hallway, holding a cold towel. "He's been like this since this morning," she cried. "He said he just had coffee, then got dizzy, nauseous, bad stomach cramps. I called the doctor. They said to monitor him for a few more hours before taking him in." I nodded slowly, eyes still locked on the mug. I stepped forward, picked it up, turned it gently in my hand. There was a faint layer of chalky white residue at the bottom. I sat down across from Craig, studying him carefully. "That coffee, you made it for me, didn't you?" I said quietly. "This morning?" Craig didn't respond. His eyes darted away, throat bobbing with a dry swallow. Sweat trickled even more. Mom looked over at me, confused. "He made you coffee?" "First time in my life," I said, staring straight at her. "I didn't drink it. I dumped it. Only one person drank it, and that's him." She froze. I turned to Craig. "I don't know what you put in it, but whatever it was, it came back to you." Craig pressed his lips together. His eyes revealed something I'd never seen before. Panic. Maybe even the realization that whatever he'd planned had just backfired. I stood up. "I got the job. I start Monday. I'll be moving out before the week's over." Mom grabbed my arm. You got it?" I nodded, throat tightening. "I did it, Mom." She pulled me into a hug. I wrapped my arms around her, but my eyes never left Craig. He kept his head down, silent. That day, in a silent house filled with the smell of medicine and failure, I realized the game had flipped. Craig was no longer the one in control. He had drunk the very thing he prepared himself, and now I didn't have to expose him. His own consequences would do that for me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat alone at my desk under the pale yellow light. Every object around me reminded me of a younger self who dreamed quietly and endured in silence. The same travel mug Craig had finished was still in my backpack. I set it on the desk, opened the lid again. The white residue at the bottom had dried, leaving a faint film. I gently scraped off a bit of powder with a toothpick and sealed it in a small zip bag, just in case I needed a sample. Then I opened the bottom drawer. Wrapped in a black cloth was a familiar item. The unlabeled pill bottle I'd quietly taken from Craig's truck a few weeks back. I'd replaced it with an identical replica, and he never noticed. I opened the bottle and poured a few of the white tablets into my palm. Smooth surface, no batch number, no imprint. Exactly like the ones I'd seen in the hands of severe insomnia patients back when I assisted in the college wellness office. I took photos of the bottle, the pills, and the mug's residue. Then I packed everything up, locked the drawer, and walked out. Mom hadn't gone to bed yet. She was sitting at the dining table, kitchen light casting shadows on her tired face. A cup of tea sat in front of her, untouched and cold. "I need to talk to you," I said, skipping pleasantries. She looked up, her eyes flickering with concern and confusion. "What is it?" I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. I opened my phone and showed her the photos of the bottle. "I found this in Craig's truck." She stared at the pictures for a long time, then frowned. "What kind of pills are these?" "High-dose sleep medication. Unlabeled, not prescribed. And I think it's what he put in the coffee this morning." Mom placed a hand on her chest, exhaling sharply. "Richard, that's a serious accusation." "I know," I said, keeping my tone calm. "But this isn't the first time." I walked her through every detail: the alarm clock reset, the design files that vanished, the Wi-Fi cutting out during interviews. I explained how Craig always had an excuse for every minor issue, but together it all formed something calculated. Her eyes went distant, like she was trying to piece together things she once brushed off as coincidence. "I've suspected it for a long time," I continued. "I just didn't have proof. But after this morning's coffee, I can't stay quiet anymore." She trembled slightly, clutching her teacup. "Craig said he must have eaten something bad. He never mentioned the coffee." I reached into my pocket and placed the pill bottle on the table. "This is what I kept as evidence. There's still residue in the mug. If needed, it can be tested." She stared at the bottle like it was a foreign object. But her eyes no longer held doubt, only rising fear. I waited a few seconds, then brought up something I'd been holding back for 3 months. "Mom, have you checked your bank accounts recently?" She flinched. "What do you mean? Your savings, retirement, credit cards? Have you looked at your transaction history?" She shook her head. "Craig said he'd handle it. Told me not to worry about that stuff. I found a notice from the bank in the mail last week, overdraft alert. But you're always careful with money. That didn't add up." I paused, lowering my voice. "Have you noticed how Craig's always carrying cash lately? The new tools, the random fishing trips, all while saying his hours were cut?" She froze. Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. It was all there behind her silence. "I think he's been taking money from your accounts. Bit by bit. Small enough to avoid alerts, but it might add up to tens of thousands." For the first time in years, I didn't see my mom as the strong woman shielding the whole family. I saw someone sitting in the ashes of broken trust, unsure which fire to put out first. "You need to check everything," I said quietly. "If I'm wrong, I'll own it. But if I'm right, this can't be ignored." A long pause. Then Mom slowly stood up. "I'll call the bank tomorrow morning and a lawyer." I nodded. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner," she whispered. "It's okay, Mom," I said. "You see it now. That's enough." As I left the table and walked back to my room, I heard her opening the file cabinet. For the first time in years, she was taking control of her life again. And I knew Craig's game was over. He just didn't know it yet. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Mom's door was shut, but I could hear pages turning, the keyboard clicking, and faint sighs held back. Breakfast was silent. Craig had left for work before sunrise, like he sensed something unraveling. Mom sat at the table, holding a thick stack of printed bank statements, eyes locked on the numbers. She hadn't touched the coffee in front of her. "I called the bank's helpline," she said after a long silence. "Requested a full transaction report from my savings account over the past 3 years." I sat down across from her, my stomach heavy. "They sent it by email. I just printed it." She laid the papers flat. $23,200. Withdrawn slowly. All transactions under 800. Just under the threshold for alerts. I swallowed hard. Even I hadn't expected it to be that much. "Some of them were forged," she whispered. "I never signed withdrawal slips, and I never approved spending for new tools or those fishing trips he said he was invited on." She didn't cry. She looked at me with a calm so cold it startled me. That's when I realized she wasn't in shock anymore. She was preparing to strike back. "You were right. He didn't just try to sabotage you," she said quietly. "He's been quietly destroying my future too." I nodded, careful not to interrupt her momentum. "I'm going to the bank this afternoon. I'll open a new account. Everything left will be moved there. The old account, frozen." "What about the joint loan?" I asked. "I'll request a split. From now on, not 1 cent will be under his control." Her voice didn't shake. I almost didn't recognize the woman who used to avoid conflict at all costs. "And I called Miss Davis," Mom added, "our old family lawyer, before I married Craig. Appointment set for Monday morning. You're planning to—" I didn't dare finish the sentence. "Divorce?" She nodded. There's no more room for doubt. I stayed quiet, partly from relief, partly from disbelief. My mother had endured far too much, for far too long, simply because she believed that any man who dared come close after years of loneliness must be worth trusting. But Craig was nothing more than a glossy finish hiding rot underneath. "I don't blame you for staying silent," she said softly. "If you'd spoken up earlier, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But yesterday, when I saw Craig sick from the coffee he made for you, I couldn't stay blind any longer." We sat like that for a while, in silence, but unified. No more explanations, no more doubt. That afternoon, Mom went to the bank. She didn't let me come. "This is something I have to do myself," she said. "I don't want anyone thinking I needed to be pushed to open my eyes." I stood on the porch, watching her car disappear down the driveway. It felt like I was witnessing her walk out of the dark for the first time, head held high. Craig came home later than usual. He must have sensed something had shifted. Mom didn't greet him, didn't ask about dinner. He walked into the kitchen, saw the stew pot still on the stove, but no table set. I sat on the sofa with my laptop, not even looking up. "Something going on?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Mom stepped out of the room, wearing a thick coat. "No, nothing," she said evenly. "I'm going to stay with Louise for a few days. Take a break." Craig froze. Out of nowhere? In the middle of the week? She smiled. A calm, resolute smile I'd never seen on her before. "Not out of nowhere. I need a clean space to breathe." A clean space. Every word she spoke hit like a slap against the years of control Craig had enforced. That night, she didn't sleep at home. She packed just a few clothes, a folder of documents, and left. Before she walked out the door, she turned to me. "Are you ready to move into your new place?" "This weekend," I replied. She nodded. "Good. Don't let anyone slow you down again." The door closed behind her, leaving a heavy silence in its place. Craig sat at the kitchen table, hands in his hair. He didn't yet know the accounts had been frozen. Didn't know the lawyer had already been contacted. But he would. And when he did, there'd be no way back. I moved out early Saturday morning, while dew still clung to the car roof and the neighborhood was hushed in quiet. No farewells, no goodbyes. Mom was still at Aunt Louise's, and Craig had vanished before dawn, leaving behind a silence I had no intention of filling. The apartment I'd rented was on the third floor of an old brick building near downtown Boise. Not fancy, not big, but the windows faced the western mountains, and most importantly, it was mine. Every square foot felt like a fresh breath. When I turned the key and heard the lock click open, a chill ran down my spine. Not from fear, but because freedom had never sounded so clear. I placed the first boxes on the hardwood floor, stood in the center of the empty room, and listened to my own silence. Among the first things I unpacked, my portfolio, a pressed suit, and the travel mug, now scrubbed clean, the white residue just a memory. That afternoon, when I went back to grab my last load from the old house, Craig was in the garage, pretending to work on the truck's spark plugs. I hadn't planned to see him, but when I opened the trunk, he stepped out, beer can in hand, still unopened. "You're really moving out?" he asked, his voice low. I didn't turn around, just nodded. "New place better than here?" "It's not better," I said, still not looking at him. "It's not toxic." A metal tool clattered onto the concrete. He crushed the can in his hand. Warped, still unopened. "You think you're smarter than everyone, huh, Richard?" he sneered. "Draw a few colorful pictures, land some office job, and suddenly you're above everyone else?" This time, I turned and looked him straight in the eye. "It's not about being above anyone. It's about not taking it anymore." He stepped forward like he was about to say something else, but I raised my hand. "Stop." Then I opened the trunk, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and gently placed it in his open toolbox on the workbench. Craig glanced at it, but didn't reach for it. My mom says, "What's this?" "I think you'll read it later." He stared at me, eyes filled with suspicion and bitterness. But I didn't wait for a response. I closed the trunk, climbed into the car, and started the engine. As I turned out of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Craig was still standing there, the beer can now on the ground, the note still in his hand. The message I left was simple but clear. Everything you tried to destroy didn't work. That night, I slept in my new apartment. No footsteps outside my door, no strange smells from the kitchen, no watchful eyes peeking through cracks. On Sunday morning, I brewed a real cup of coffee, sat by the window, and wrote an email, thanking my new employer. On Monday, I started my job at North Range. The office was open, the coworkers were kind, and my ideas were welcomed without question. No one doubted my worth. No one tried to tear down my efforts. During my lunch break, I stepped out onto the balcony and called Mom. "Are you settling in?" she asked. "Yes. Everything's beginning." Did Craig say anything? "There's nothing left to say. He knows." She was quiet for a moment. Then softly, "I'm getting things in order too. Meeting the lawyer this afternoon." I smiled. We were both leaving that toxic place. Taking different roads, but heading to the same destination. Freedom. Before we hung up, Mom told me to check the mailbox at my new place. I went downstairs, opened it, and found a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten card. Start over from where you're free to be yourself. Hear the voices inside. Next to the card was a small key attached to a tag that read, "Freedom isn't something you're given, it's something you take back." I gripped the key in my hand. I didn't know what it opened, but to me it meant one thing. No one else held the keys to my life anymore. 3 weeks after I left that house, Mom called me in the middle of the workday. Her voice was calm, but urgent. "The police just left the house," she said. "Craig was arrested this morning." I stood frozen in the empty conference room, coffee still in hand. "What for?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "3 charges," she said. "Forgery, embezzlement, and possession of a controlled substance without a prescription." The words hit like a final door slamming shut. She explained everything had unfolded in less than an hour. They arrived at 7:15 a.m. with a search warrant and took Craig on the spot. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. During the investigation, the bank had worked with law enforcement to confirm a pattern of suspicious withdrawals from Mom's account, including at least 8 forged signatures. More importantly, cross-checking Craig's work schedule and transaction data showed that most withdrawals were made at an ATM near his usual morning stop. They even pulled security footage. One clip showed him wearing a backwards baseball cap, face mostly hidden, but a small detail gave him away. A tattoo on his left wrist that read Maddie, the name of the daughter he almost never mentioned. Mom didn't say much about how she felt, but when she told me an officer found an unlabeled white pill bottle hidden inside a broken power tool case in the garage, I could hear the tremble in her breath. "Identical to the one you gave me," she said quietly. And there was another, unopened bottle. Same batch. There were no prescriptions for that medication in Mom's medical history. Craig had no diagnosis that required it either. It didn't take long for authorities to determine illegal possession, signs of misuse, and potential intent to harm. "The court's calling me as a key witness," she said. "Davis says I can file for damages." I didn't ask how much she'd demand. It didn't matter. This was never about money. A week later, I got an update from Mom. The preliminary hearing was set for 2 months out. Craig had been released on local probation, his passport seized, and his accounts frozen to allow for restitution. I didn't attend the court hearing where Craig was sentenced, but Mom did, and she told me everything, in a steady voice, without a hint of regret. "He's got 18 months probation," she said. "He has to repay the money he took, cover legal fees, and pay a civil penalty. If he violates anything, he goes straight to jail." Thought about his face when he read the note I'd left, the one that said everything he tried to destroy hadn't worked. Maybe at that moment he still believed he was in control, but by the time he stood in court, that illusion had shattered. "Only said one thing," Mom added. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." But no one believed him anymore. When she stopped talking, I wasn't sure what to feel. Satisfaction? Anger? Relief? In the end, I just asked, "How are you feeling?" "For the first time in years," she said, "I feel like I stepped out of a room filled with poisoned air." That night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the stars blink into view across the spring sky. A light breeze carried the scent of damp earth and the hum of distant traffic. I remembered all those nights lying in my old room, haunted by the question, what if I made all this up? There was no doubt now. The truth was out. Justice didn't come with thunder, but it cracked through the walls of the past. I opened my phone, pulled up the photo of the coffee mug, the very first image saved in my evidence folder. Then I deleted it. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't need it anymore. That story was over, and I was ready to write a new one. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room on the 8th floor of North Range headquarters, presentation remote in hand, 5 senior executives waiting. On the screen behind me was the winter campaign slogan I'd spent all summer developing. Touch the snow, feel something real. I opened with a short video. A father and daughter pitching a tent under falling snow, using all North Range gear. No actors, just real customers, real moments. Discovered through last season's photo contest. "I don't want this campaign to just sell gear," I said as the lights came back on. "I want it to sell memories, to remind people why they step into the woods, face the cold, and carry what matters most." No one spoke for a moment. Then the marketing director nodded and smiled. "Richard, You're leading this campaign, creative, media, and the launch event in Colorado. Are you ready? I tightened my grip on the remote. Absolutely. As I walked out of the conference room, my coworkers clapped me on the back. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like finally standing where I belonged. That evening, I got a text from Mom. Grand opening next week, any chance you can come by? Attached was a photo of her standing in front of a small red brick building in downtown Meridian, the same spot we once stopped at just to browse discount magazines. It's now a cafe called June's Brew, named after a grandmother who passed long ago. The only person, Mom once said, who ever stood up for her in a cold and distant family. I drove there over the weekend. The old building had been repainted, its glass windows gleaming with a hand-drawn chalk sign. Gentle coffee, fresh starts. My mom met me at the door in a green apron, her hair neatly pinned back. She looked 10 years younger than she did when she lived with Craig. "I've done everything I used to think was just a dream," she said, handing me my first cappuccino. From the menu and decor to the music playlist. I sat at a window-side table, watching customers come and go. The place felt cozy. Old oak wood and warm lights made it feel like a tiny library. A group of students laughed in the corner. An older woman read by the window. "You attracted the right people," I smiled. The whole world, packed into less than 500 square feet. Mom sat beside me, eyes soft. "And what about you? How's the campaign?" I told her about the conference room, the big decisions, and what it meant to lead a project that wasn't just a job, but a responsibility. "I still remember my first mock-up," I said, and how Craig laughed, called it a coloring book. "Now every board has my signature on it." She didn't speak, but I saw pride glint in her eyes. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, a light rain began to fall. The smell of coffee and the clinking of spoons blended into a rhythm of life I never thought I'd reach. "I think I'll keep that old mug," I said, sipping the last of my drink. "I thought you'd throw it out." "I almost did," I smiled. "But not anymore. Not to remember Craig, but to remind myself how close I came to losing everything, just because I didn't believe in myself." Mom nodded. "Keep it. But put it where you choose, not where he placed it." For the first time, I understood the full weight of those words. We left the cafe late that evening. Mom locked up, the neon sign outside reflecting both our silhouettes in the glass. A woman once controlled now ran her own store. A young man once crippled by doubt now led a national campaign. No one handed us freedom, we reclaimed it. Piece by piece, with clarity, persistence, and unshakable belief. As I drove away from Meridian, the old mug sat quietly on the passenger seat. Empty, but clean. Just like our fresh start. Not perfect, but solid enough that we'd never go back. Richard's story is proof that sometimes, to step into the light, you must first face the darkest corners of your life. Once a young man, living under control and self-doubt, he rose up, defended his dreams, exposed the truth, and reclaimed freedom. For himself and for his mother. His journey isn't just about growing up. It's a message to anyone feeling trapped. Justice exists, as long as you're determined to chase it. What do you think of Richard's journey and his mother's choice? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow this channel for more powerful true stories and life lessons from extraordinary everyday families.